A dolphin surfaces beside a stranger's boat. She isn't hunting. She isn't hurt. She's pushing something toward the hull, over and over, refusing to leave. It's her calf, tangled in fishing line, barely breathing, and she is handing it to the one creature on this planet with every reason to be her enemy. Us. This isn't a one-off. It isn't a viral fluke you scroll past and forget. Cats deposit kittens on the porches of strangers. Elephant herds stand for hours beside a calf, waiting for a ranger to notice. Crows drop injured chicks at the feet of people they've never technically met. Different continents. Different species. Zero coordination between them, and yet the exact same decision. Made again and again. When it matters most, hand the baby to the human. So ask yourself the obvious question. The one that should be bothering you right now. Every instinct a wild animal has says run from us. We've hunted them, caged them, paved over their homes for 10,000 years. By any fair evolutionary math, we should be the last species on Earth a mother trusts with her child. So why do so many of them do exactly that? Is it desperation? Is it something closer to a bond we don't fully understand yet? Stick around, because the real answer isn't one tidy explanation. It's a stack of them. And by the end of this video, you may never look at your own pets the same way again. Before we go further, I want to ask you for something small. Stories like these matter, because they remind us we're not separate from the natural world. We're part of it, and every once in a while, it notices. If you believe animals deserve to be understood and not just watched, hit subscribe and tap the bell so you don't miss what we dig up next. This channel exists because people like you keep showing up for it. Thank you for being here. Now, let's get into it. Let's start with the least romantic explanation, because honestly, it's probably the most common one. Biologists call it the safe zone theory, and the logic is almost uncomfortably practical. Predators, wolves, coyotes, big cats, tend to avoid areas with heavy human activity. We're loud, we're unpredictable, and we've spent centuries actively hunting anything that competes with us for territory. Over generations, plenty of wild species have quietly learned one simple rule. Where humans are, apex predators usually aren't. So when a mother deer beds her fawn near a hiking trail, or a fox den turns up suspiciously close to a farmhouse, it isn't affection, it's math. She isn't trusting you specifically. She's using your presence as a wall between her baby and something far more dangerous than you. In this version of the story, humans aren't a safe haven. We're a deterrent, a human shield, built entirely by accident that certain animals have learned to exploit. It's a little humbling, honestly. In some of these cases, we're not the hero of the story at all. We're just furniture that happens to scare off the real threat. But that's only the beginning. Because this explanation completely falls apart once you look at domesticated animals, and what they do is a different story entirely. If you've ever owned a dog, you may have already lived this scene. A mother dog, trusting her owner completely, will pick up her newborn puppies one at a time and carry them across the room to deposit them directly at that person's feet. Not hide them. Not guard them from you. Deliver them to you. This is a completely different mechanism than the safe zone theory. And it comes down to roughly 15,000 years of co-evolution. Dogs didn't just get used to living near humans. Their entire psychology was reshaped around cooperative care, shared food, and mutual protection. Somewhere in that long shared history, humans got permanently filed under pack member, and pack members get access to the puppies. It isn't an accident of proximity. It's the entire point of how the relationship was built. cats tell a quieter but equally striking version of this story. Outdoor cats in feral colonies have a well-documented habit of delivering kittens to specific people, not randomly, but to the one neighbor who leaves food out, or the person who once pulled a thorn from a stray's paw months earlier and apparently never got unremembered for it. Researchers describe cats as constantly building a kind of mental map of the world around them. Which humans are calm and predictable, and which ones chase them off with a broom. Once you clear that bar, you don't just get tolerated, you get reclassified from potential threat to something closer to an honorary member of the colony. And membership comes with kitten delivery privileges, whether you asked for them or not. Psychologists studying human-animal bonds have started borrowing a term straight out of child development to describe this: secure attachment. When a domesticated animal has that kind of bond with a specific person, bringing the baby over during a moment of stress isn't strange at all. Stop. It's exactly what you'd expect a securely attached animal to do: share the win and hand over the most important thing they have. Here's where it stops being explainable by proximity or years of coexistence. Because some of the most jaw-dropping cases involve animals that have barely interacted with humans at all. Take whales and dolphins. There are documented cases, not one, not two, but a genuine pattern of mother whales positioning an injured or entangled calf directly beside a boat and simply holding position. Not panicking, not fleeing, waiting, almost as if she's saying, "Your turn, do the thing you do." Marine biologists point to something specific here. Cetaceans already live inside tightly bonded pods that practice cooperative babysitting and coordinated rescue behavior among their own kind. If your brain is already wired to recognize this individual needs help and that individual over there can provide it, extending that same logic across species lines apparently isn't the enormous leap it sounds like. Then there's the case that tends to break people a little: elephants. Elephant memory is famous for a reason, and their social bonds run for generations. In several documented sanctuary situations, an elephant mother has approached a specific caretaker with an injured calf, positioned it directly in front of them, stepped back, and waited, sometimes for hours, clearly anticipating help. And it doesn't stop there. Elephants have been recorded recognizing former caretakers after 10 or more years apart, reacting with behavior that looks unmistakably like genuine emotional recognition. If an elephant can hold on to a positive memory of one specific human for a decade, it stops being surprising that the same elephant eventually decides that human is a safe bet when a calf's life is on the line. Scientists studying this pattern describe it as a kind of triage decision. These animals aren't just comfortable enough around us to relax. They appear to recognize a problem beyond their own physical ability to fix: an entanglement, a wound, a respiratory issue, and then identify a specific entity in their environment that has at some point demonstrated the ability to fix exactly that kind of problem. That's not blind trust. That's something closer to calling in a specialist. Bird behavior gets wildly underrated in this conversation, and crows especially deserve more credit than they get. Crows can recognize individual human faces for years. They hold something that looks a lot like a grudge against people who've wronged them, and something that looks just as clearly like loyalty toward people who've helped them. There are documented cases of wild birds, magpies, crows, even certain raptors, bringing injured or abandoned chicks toward specific humans who've previously shown some form of caretaking behavior. And Here's the detail that makes it stranger: that trust doesn't always have to be earned firsthand. Crow parents appear to pass their assessment of specific humans down to their own offspring, who somehow behave cautiously or comfortably around certain people before ever directly interacting with them. It suggests some of this isn't just individual trust. It might be socially inherited trust, learned the same way a human kid absorbs which neighbors are the friendly ones without ever being told outright. Primates take this even further. In areas with long-term research stations, there are documented cases of wild and semi-wild primates, chimpanzees, bonobos, certain monkey species, bringing injured or orphaned infants directly toward familiar human researchers. This lines up almost perfectly with the behavior primates already practice among themselves, called alloparenting, where infants are cared for not just by their biological mother, but by a wider network of proven, trusted group members. Extending that same logic to a long-term, consistently calm, non-threatening human observer isn't actually that large a cognitive jump. Years of predictable behavior stop, and a researcher effectively gets absorbed into the troop's mental map of who's allowed near the babies. There's a chemical layer to all of this that rarely gets discussed. Humans carry a distinct, recognizable scent signature. Soap, sweat, food, whatever detergent happens to be popular that decade. And animals with strong scent memory, which is most mammals, appear to catalog specific human scent profiles the same way they'd catalog a known, safe member of their own group. Once a particular human gets filed under safe, that classification can apparently last an extraordinarily long time, which helps explain why some of these baby-delivering moments happen with animals that have had only a handful of prior encounters with the person involved. There's also something almost eerie about how well humans respond to distress. Researchers have found real structural similarities in the pitch and urgency of distress calls across many mammal species, similar enough that humans instinctively respond to sounds we've never technically heard before. A crying human infant and a distressed puppy trigger remarkably similar reactions in adult humans. Faster heart rate, immediate attention, an urge to go check. Some scientists believe this instinctive sensitivity isn't limited to our own species' young at all. It might be a broader, somewhat leaky caretaking instinct that occasionally fires for other species too. And if animals have picked up on the fact that we consistently respond to distress with help instead of aggression, that reputation becomes something worth exploiting. Even across species lines. This is where a genuinely fascinating piece of research comes in, sometimes called the safe haven hypothesis. The idea is that across multiple, completely independently evolved social species, individual animals can form something structurally similar, though obviously not identical, to the attachment bond between a human infant and a caregiver. Animals with that kind of bond don't just tolerate a specific human. They actively seek that person out during moments of stress, the same way a frightened toddler runs toward a parent instead of away from danger in a random direction. Once you frame it that way, a wild animal showing up with its most vulnerable offspring during a crisis stops looking bizarre. It starts looking like exactly what you'd expect from a creature seeking its own version of safety. Now, it's worth being honest instead of only leaning into the warm, fuzzy version of this story. Sometimes bringing a baby to a human isn't a calculated, thoughtful gesture of trust at all. Sometimes it's closer to desperation. A mother facing a predator, a flooding den, an injury she physically cannot treat, may simply be drawn toward the nearest large, slow-moving, non-predatory shape in the area. And awkwardly, that's frequently us. We're big, we're loud, and we tend to smell like campfires and sunscreen rather than anything that reads as a genuine threat. But even that desperation still requires an animal's brain to run a risk calculation that, historically, we haven't always deserved. The fact that approach the human consistently beats do literally anything else in a moment of crisis still says something remarkable about how animals have recalibrated their threat models around us over time. Despite an extremely mixed track record as a species, we've somehow ended up coded as a viable emergency option across an enormous range of unrelated animals. That's not nothing. And it's not universal, either. This behavior shows up almost exclusively in populations with a long history of low-conflict coexistence or individuals with a specific positive past experience or species with strong enough memory and social cognition to make nuanced, case-by-case judgments about specific humans rather than judging our entire species at once. Heavily hunted or persecuted populations show none of this. In other words, animals aren't trusting humanity in general. They're trusting you specifically. The one who moved slowly, who didn't scream and run, who left food out during a hard winter. Stop. There's one more piece worth mentioning, and it's arguably the most controversial theory in this entire conversation. Empathy, chemically speaking. Oxytocin, the hormone most associated with bonding and trust, exists across almost every mammal species, not just us. Some researchers believe that when an animal looks into a human's eyes and reads no threat, that same hormonal pathway can fire, briefly bridging a gap that evolution never really designed to be crossed. It doesn't happen every time, and it isn't proof of some grand cosmic connection. But it's a real physical mechanism that could explain why certain encounters feel less like a calculated risk and more like a moment of genuine, mutual recognition. And whatever the mechanism, the effect compounds over time. A human responds well to one distressed animal. That animal, or its wider social group, remembers. The next generation inherits a slightly lower baseline fear response toward humans in general, or toward that specific person. Then the cycle repeats, quietly building, generation after generation, toward exactly the kind of trust we've spent this entire video trying to explain. It isn't magic. It's small, repeated evidence, accumulating case by case, until a wild animal finally looks at a human and decides, yeah, this one's probably fine. Hand over the baby. So why do animals bring their babies to humans? Not because we've earned some universal trust from the animal kingdom. Our track record is far too complicated for that. It's because, across an enormous range of species and an enormous range of situations, individual animals have quietly built individual case files on individual humans. And some of us, enough of us, apparently keep passing the test. Every slow, careful approach to an injured animal. Every bowl of food left out for a stray. Every calm, quiet response to something wild and frightened. Each one becomes a tiny data point in a ledger we don't even know we're contributing to. And every so often, when the stakes are at their absolute highest, that ledger gets cashed in. And a human ends up holding a kitten, a calf, a chick, or a dolphin pup, wondering how on earth they became the chosen one. We didn't get chosen randomly. Somewhere along the way, despite everything, we earned it. One quiet, unremarkable moment at a time. And maybe that's the real takeaway here. This behavior changes us too. Rangers and researchers who've lived through it often describe it as one of the most meaningful moments of their careers. proof that the slow, thankless work of building trust with a wild population actually means something on the other side. So, the next time you see a dolphin nudging an injured calf toward a boat, or a stray cat parading kittens onto a porch, or an elephant herd standing patiently beside a calf waiting for help, don't just file it away as a wholesome clip. File it away as proof that on a planet full of species with every reason to fear us, we've somehow convinced a few of them that we're worth the risk. Have you ever had a trust moment like this with an animal? Tell me about it in the comments. I read every single one. If this video made you see your own pets a little differently, hit subscribe, share it with someone who needs the reminder, and I'll see you in the next one.